Daniel Carter hadn't spoken to another human in 3 days. That was exactly how he liked it. He sat on a ridge overlooking a frozen lake in the heart of the Alaskan backcountry, the silence broken only by the soft, mechanical clicks of his camera. A wilderness photographer by trade, but a loner by necessity, Daniel had come here for peace. And maybe, if he admitted it to himself, to feel something again. Since the accident 2 years ago, the world had grown quiet. His daughter Emily, just 9 years old, gone in a car crash that hadn't been his fault, but still crushed him every waking moment. Nature was the only place that didn't expect him to smile, explain, or move on. Every photo he took felt like a conversation with her. Every sunrise like a whisper that maybe, just maybe, she was still watching. The cold cut through his jacket, but he barely felt it. He scanned the tree line, looking for movement, for the story the wild might want to tell him that day. His camera had become his only real companion, the way he processed the world, one frozen frame at a time. That's when he saw her, a large grizzly, limping through the snow, barely 50 yards from his campsite. He froze. She was wounded, her right shoulder matted with dried blood. But what stopped Daniel cold wasn't her injury. It was what she was carrying. A cub. It dangled from her jaw, weak and motionless. Not dead, but close. Daniel reached slowly for his camera. Then hesitated. The bear stopped. She looked directly at him. It wasn't the usual wild animal glance. It was direct, measured, almost pleading. She took another step. Daniel's instincts screamed, "Run! Climb! Hide!" But something deeper, something broken and buried inside him, held him in place. The bear limped closer. 20 yards, 15, 10. Then she did something that defied everything he knew about wildlife behavior. She placed the cub down in the snow and stepped back. Daniel blinked. The cub whimpered, barely moving. The mother let out a deep, low moan, almost a cry. Then she did it again. A whimper that cracked into a sorrowful sound that didn't belong in the wild. It was heartbreak. She looked at Daniel, then at the cub, then... She turned and walked away. Not far, just to the tree line. She sat and watched. Daniel dropped to his knees, crawled the last few feet. The cub was breathing, but shallow. Starved, cold. Its little chest rose and fell in uneven spurts. Flecks of ice clung to its tiny fur. It made a sound like a broken whistle, so small, so helpless. He didn't think. He wrapped it in his thick parka, pulled it close to his chest, and ran back to camp. The fire took minutes to spark. The cub barely twitched. Daniel laid it near the flame, warming his fingers and pressing them gently against its chest. "Come on," he whispered. "Come on, little one." He gave it sips of water from his palm, rubbed its paws, stroked its tiny head. Anything. He built a crude warming box with his sleeping bag and a spare blanket, huddling next to it through the night. The hours dragged. He fed the fire with every dry twig he could find, not once letting the cub out of his arms. He spoke to it in a low voice, telling it stories about the world, about the little girl who used to sleep on his chest the same way, about the music she liked, the drawings she made of bears. The cub didn't move, until it did. A cough, a weak cry. The cub stirred. Daniel exhaled a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He smiled for the first time in months. Tears welled in his eyes. Just outside the glow of the firelight, he saw movement. The mother bear. She hadn't left. She was watching. Still, silent. Her fur shimmered under the moonlight, dusted with frost. Her eyes caught the firelight and glinted with something Daniel couldn't name. She bowed her head. Daniel looked down at the cub in his arms, then back at the bear. He felt something open up inside him, a raw ache, a fragile hope. He whispered, "I promise. I'll save her." The bear stayed until dawn, never approaching, never threatening, just present. And when the sky began to shift from black to pale grey, she stood. She turned one last time to look at Daniel, then disappeared into the trees. Daniel didn't move for a long time. He just held the cub and watched the spot where she'd vanished. He didn't know it yet, but this moment was the beginning of something that would change him forever. The snow had turned to a soft drizzle by morning, but Daniel barely noticed. He hadn't slept. The cub lay curled against his chest inside the tent, breathing steadier now, though still weak. Daniel had fed her with a dropper of warm water and honey, something he remembered reading in a survival manual long ago. She had no strength to resist, but her eyes stayed open, following him with an eerie familiarity. It was like she could feel something in him, his loss, his pain, and somehow he could feel hers. Daniel stepped outside to gather more firewood when he saw the tracks, massive paw prints. The mother bear had returned to the clearing while he slept. She hadn't approached, just circled once, and left something. A fish, laid perfectly beside a pine cone, like an offering. Daniel stared for a long time. Wind stirred the treetops. The silence around him felt sacred. He knelt beside it, touched the snow. "It wasn't random," he murmured. "It's a thank you." From that moment, Daniel changed. He wasn't just surviving out there anymore. He had purpose, a reason to stay longer, a life to protect. Every day he fed the cub, talked to her, kept her warm. He even gave her a name, Hope. She began to move, to cry softly when hungry, to swat weakly at his fingers. Her small growls reminded him of his daughter's laughter, and her eyes, those eyes, held the same spark that Emily's had. The mother bear never came close, but she always returned, always left something, a bone, a dead rabbit. Once even a thick wad of fur, her own, ripped from her flank and dropped by the tree line. "She's helping," Daniel told the cub. "She's watching over you, through me." He began documenting everything, not for the world, for himself. Pages of notes, photos, sketches, the way the cub's breathing changed when she heard his voice, the way the mother circled the camp every dawn. He wasn't just healing the cub, he was healing himself. By the 7th day, the cub stood. Wobbly, shaky, but she stood. Daniel cried. He hadn't cried since the accident, not once. But watching the tiny creature take a few clumsy steps towards the fire, sniffing at his boot, nuzzling into his jacket, it broke him. He whispered, "You survived. And maybe so can I." That night the aurora borealis lit up the sky. Green and violet curtains danced above the camp. Daniel sat beside the fire, the cub in his lap, watching the heavens shimmer. For the first time, the pain in his chest felt lighter. He whispered stories into the cub's ear. Stories of Emily, of laughter, of warmth, of the days before loss. Hope looked up at him. And for a second, just one fleeting moment, it felt like he was speaking to his daughter again. Later, as the fire died and stars blinked overhead, he heard something at the edge of the camp. The mother. Closer now, not threatening, just waiting. Daniel stepped forward slowly, holding Hope in his arms. The cub didn't resist. He approached until only 10 feet separated them. The bear stood, not in aggression, in awe. She looked at her baby, then at Daniel. Then she dipped her massive head, a full bow. Daniel did the same. In that moment, something passed between them. Not fear, not wild instinct, but understanding. Daniel placed the cub gently on the ground. Hope looked back at him, then walked forward. The mother sniffed her, licked her cheek, made a soft sound Daniel couldn't interpret. But he felt it, like a thank you, like love. Then she turned and disappeared into the forest, her cub following close behind. Daniel stood in the silence for a long, long time, then picked up his camera and captured the tracks left behind. Later, the world would see those images. The story would go viral. People would write poems. Wildlife foundations would share the tale of the grieving bear and the man who healed her. But no one, not even the millions who shared his photo online, would ever truly understand what had happened out there. Not until they lost something and were gifted the chance to feel again. He stayed another day, then 2. He packed slowly, not because he needed to, but because he was afraid of leaving this sacred place behind. Before he left, he returned to the clearing, to where it had all started. He carved a small message into the bark of an old pine. For hope, for Emily, for healing. And then, finally, Daniel walked away, a changed man, forever.